Serious health scares, lawsuits, terrible abuse, and tragic loss have all been part of the unusual life of Cyndi Lauper. Before she became one of the most iconic stars of the 80s, Cyndi Lauper was born Cynthia Lauper and grew up in Ozone Park, a neighborhood in Queens, New York. In a piece for the Wall Street Journal, she shared that her home was just a stone's throw from factories run by Singer Sewing Machine and Borden's Milk. She'd sit on her step and watch people trudge to and from work every day. She wrote, "You'd constantly hear shoulda, coulda, woulda from people who missed their calling, or from disenfranchised women who were put down by their parents or husbands." Inside her home, things were just as bleak. One of 3 children, she recalled her parents divorcing when she was little. Her mother was an aspiring singer and had been given a full scholarship to a musical school, which her parents had forbidden her from accepting. Lauper's grandmother would tell her similar stories of her childhood. She wasn't allowed to date a boy she'd fallen for, and she'd explained that obedience was just the way it was. Lauper wrote in her book, a memoir, "Her stories used to fill me with so many emotions. I could never undo the wrong done to her because of a ridiculous mentality that kept women back." Cyndi Lauper recounted in her memoir what it had been like living with her mother and an abusive stepfather, recalling a hole in the bathroom door made when he threw her mother into it. When the police came in response to a call from the neighbors, she wrote that they didn't take the domestic violence seriously. She also wrote about why she was always careful to lock the door when she was in there. "I heard a creepy giggle and saw my stepfather's pear-shaped shadow against the frosted glass. I even saw his crazy eye looking through the hole. It was too much. It was worse than him touching himself right outside our bedroom window." She also recalled her stepfather threatening to sexually assault her and her sister, and she believed him enough to sleep only lightly with her door locked. A lapse into apathy helped her get through the days, and as soon as she could, she left. Lauper was raised in a Catholic family and explained to the New York Post that her mother's guilt over being divorced had transferred to her at a young age, saying, "I think my mother thought we were gonna go to hell because she was divorced." It led to a lot of conflict. She recounted that she had grown up thinking that figures like the Virgin Mary and Jesus were what she called secret friends who you can call in times of trouble. But the time she spent attending area Catholic schools was incredibly hard. In 1984, Rolling Stone interviewed Lauper, who made it clear that there was no love lost between her and the nuns who ran the Catholic schools she'd been sent to. She recalled getting slapped across the face for being seen talking to a boy, and being violently assaulted by a nun when a friend had asked her to scratch an itch on her back. The time Lauper spent in Catholic school could be counted in months before she was kicked out, but the damage had been done. She consistently failed her classes, even after finding new schools. Lauper says that it had negatively shaped her opinion of herself for a long time, but it didn't stop her from attending college.
Even though I was told, "What do you want to go to college for? You're going to get married anyway." And I said, "Really? Look at me. I'm a freak. Nobody's going to marry me."
Listen to Cyndi Lauper talk about her childhood and teenage years, and it's clear that her strong sense of individuality wasn't always easy for her to deal with. When she spoke with the New York Post in 2016, she told the story of growing up in a very segregated neighborhood. When she was in the 4th grade, her best friend was a boy named Edward who was black. While he introduced her to Motown, she was only allowed to spend limited time with him. Rolling Stone interviewed Lauper in 1984. And at the time, they noted that she was still making the transition from what they called a laughingstock in both her personal and professional lives to an absolute icon. She was well aware of it too, telling the magazine, "People used to throw rocks at me for my clothes. Now they want to know where I buy them, right? Doesn't that seem weird to you?"
How does that feel to see people dress up as you for Halloween?
Well, I think I've been a Halloween costume quite a bit.
Yeah.
Before turning to music, Cyndi Lauper worked a variety of odd jobs, including waitressing, modeling for art students, and teaching martial arts. She told Rolling Stone that she didn't actually know martial arts, but that didn't stop her from doing what she needed to do to survive. Lauper left home to try to make her own way in the world, but eventually ended up back in Queens. That's when she turned to music, and it wasn't until 1979 that a demo tape for her band, Blue Angel, ended up getting the attention of Allman Brothers manager Steve Masarski. It just didn't fly though, and after a few rough years, they fired him. That led to a lawsuit in which Masarski claimed Lauper and Blue Angel owed him a whopping $80,000, the equivalent of $275,000 in 2022. The lawsuit was so catastrophic for the struggling band that Lauper filed for bankruptcy. It wasn't until 1983 that her claim was granted, and she was free and clear of the lawsuits and the debt. Even then, the music press occasionally remained unkind to her.
I had people come up to me once and tell me I sang like a rat.
With the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade, Cyndi Lauper released a new acoustic version of her song Sally's Pigeons. She wrote the song about a girl she knew as a teenager who died after attempting a secret abortion. In her memoir, Lauper shared her own story. She had been just starting out in her music career at the age of 23, a struggling artist at a time when the clubs she sang at rarely paid. Feeling sick and unable to afford medical care, she went to a clinic where a med student examined her and told her she was pregnant. The med student added that he could give her some medication to make her feel better, but it would probably result in birth defects for the baby. Lauper took the medicine to alleviate her extreme pain and went on to have an abortion. She shared her heartbreak. I used to cry for a long, long time onto a pillow that became tear-stained. Even when I was famous, I felt the need to hold on to that pillow. In 2021, Rolling Stone spoke with Cyndi Lauper for the anniversary of her second album, True Colors. Fans were shocked at the change in tone from her first hit album, but the album reflected what she was going through at the time, having just lost her friend to AIDS. Before her friend died, he had asked her to write a song for him, which was a heavy thing to take on. Lauper says that the song that she wrote with him in mind was Boy Blue. At the same time, though, she knew that True Colors was the song that they all needed, saying, "It was for me and his partner who was left behind and his friends who loved him, to comfort us." In 2019, Lauper shared a post to her Facebook page remembering her friend, the release of Boy Blue, and the fact that it coincided with the start of Pride Month. She wrote, "He was so tangled up in so much of my sorrow and so cloaked in my sadness that I don't know if it was good enough for him." Endometriosis happens when the lining of the uterus starts growing in areas where it can't be eliminated on a monthly basis. That buildup of tissue can cause everything from extreme pain to fertility issues, and Cyndi Lauper was diagnosed with the disease in 1985. As she wrote in her memoir, that was when doctors discovered a group of tumors that had developed in her stomach, including one that had grown to the size of a grapefruit. When she was asked to sign the paperwork giving doctors permission to do what they needed to do during the surgery, she refused. Instead, she insisted that they wake her up and tell her what was going on, writing, "It sounds extreme, but I had my own beliefs and convictions, and I was going to live by them, or die by them." Those convictions were rooted in what she had seen happen to her aunt. She had undergone surgery to remove a lump in her breast, but by the time she woke, she had been left with permanent scarring and the removal of much more than she had expected. Lauper's recovery took weeks, and she suffered several relapses that required more surgical intervention. Lauper has been candid in her memoir about her struggles with depression and suicidal thoughts. After visiting the Soviet Union in 1989, she said that the 2-week trip had made her realize that even though she was surrounded by people, she was still incredibly lonely, a feeling she'd carried since childhood.
I tried like hell to fit in. The more I tried to be like everybody else, the worse it got, because then I really stood out like a sore thumb.
At the time, her attempt at breaking into the movies had failed, her record company was dictating what they wanted to hear from her, and her relationship had fallen apart. She was at a point in her career that she had been fighting to reach for so long, and it wasn't great for her. She wrote, "I thought, why don't you just kill yourself? You thought that this would be the pinnacle of your life, and now where are you?" Lauper recounted nights where she would do nothing but sit on the floor, cry, drink, and talk to the moon. "I thought the sadness would never go away. I must say the only thing that always prevented me from suicide is that I never wanted a headline to read, 'Girl who wanted to have fun just didn't.' I didn't want my life to be reduced to that." If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988 or by calling 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. The devastation brought by Hurricane Sandy in the autumn of 2012 resulted in many casualties. Many were elderly, with most deaths attributed to drowning, downed trees, and the conditions post-storm and pre-cleanup. Among the dead was 90-year-old George Stathis, who was discovered in the basement of his home in Rockaway Park, Queens. The official cause of his death was drowning. Just days after his death, Lauper paid tribute by dedicating a performance of Time After Time to him. She told the crowd gathered for the Lenox Hill benefit concert, "I lost my Uncle George in the hurricane. He was old. He didn't want to leave his house." Lauper had been in Chicago at the time the storm hit. And when she called back home to check on her family, they said what many others had echoed. They didn't think the storm was going to be anywhere near as bad as it was. When Cyndi Lauper's mother, Katrine Dominique, passed away at 91 years old due to symptoms associated with Alzheimer's and dementia, Lauper posted a heartfelt tribute. She talked about how grateful she was that they had gotten to work together on her Girls Just Wanna Have Fun music video, and also talked about how her mother's experience, struggles, and strength made her very aware of the difficulties that faced many women. Speaking to USA Today about her career, her recent work, and her activism, Lauper said, "I don't believe she's gone. She's not on the planet anymore, but she's a part of me and I see her all the time. I'm grateful to have had her for so long. She inspired me in so many ways. In the end, I was able to stay with her and I feel blessed."